Hello, everyone, and welcome to December and the end of 2024's Educators Book Club. I am going to share our lovely graphic. See our three smiley faces. Mr. Colber, Mr. Parry, and myself. And yeah, this is actually a special. So we're going to be a special. Ooh. We need some canned oohs or something, Stephen and Mark.
If I can react, I'll react with this.
Thank you. Thanks for the reactions. We're going to be going for an hour and a half, and we've got two special guests tonight. So that is really, really awesome. It is being recorded. So if you are going to join us up on stage, please just be aware it's being recorded. We'll be popping it up on YouTube afterwards. Think about what's in your background, etc. And use the chat all through. At the sort of about halfway through the chat, we will actually invite anyone here to come up and share. Tell us what you've been reading. You're welcome to make comments all through all through the chat. Maybe I'm going to regret saying that at the end of this hour and a half. Appropriate comments? No. Feel free to say whatever you like. This is a pretty chilled out chat. And Stephen and Mark, how are you both?
Very good, thanks.
Stephen starts these off by not really saying anything, and he talks more and more as the hour goes by, I promise.
Okay.
Yes.
I might start talking then.
Yes. Kick us off, Mark.
It's good to see a large group. Hello, everyone.
Say hi in the chat.
So I'm going to share my screen. I've been reading this book here called The Pruning Principle. And I wasn't planning on reading it, and I sort of just picked it up. I didn't know, didn't have any context of the authors or even the book or the ideas or anything. I just started reading it, and essentially, I like metaphors a lot, just in my everyday life and in my teaching and in my work. I kind of like symbols and ideas and how you can transfer kind of thinking into another idea. Well, this book is all about the metaphor of pruning. There's the little secateurs, but this idea that if in a school, and it says it on the cover, the subtitle, the strategic subtraction. So essentially, everyone knows that schools are really busy. All workplaces are busy generally, but the book basically has a less is more kind of idea. So instead of adding, whether it be professional development or a kind of some sort of program or an initiative or something, it's saying stop and critically assess what you're doing and why are you doing it? What are you hoping to achieve? And then start pruning it back. And so the metaphor, they very early on in the book, they kind of they outline what are the advantages of pruning. And it's actually to make the plant stronger, ultimately. And it revisits that, and it gives really practical examples, which I really like. And I like a lot also, it has little anecdotes and quotes. I'm just looking for one now. I can't find one. Here. They've got, I like it structured. It's got each chapter has a summary. So if you're really busy, you can just read the summary. But then it's got some reflection questions. So I really like reflection as well. But then it's got these anecdotes from living, breathing educators, and maybe they've tried something and it's worked, or they give their perspective. And so, and then I do have another tab. The authors are actually, I was reading about them. I had no context of the authors. And so they're actually quite busy people. They're doing stuff, researching and other activities. And then they run workshops related to this sort of territory. And then if you keep clicking, there's all these other tools like here's a pruning sort map. So you can, when you're critically assessing whether something's worth ditching, you can say, well, is it going to be worth it? Maybe it's, central to our school, so it's probably best not to prune that one just yet. One of the things I liked as well, it emphasizes that teachers generally, because we're generally very caring people, we want to see our students thrive, and so sometimes it's really difficult when you're removing things that are maybe even things that are working really well. You've invested time and money, and that goes into the psychology of that. It's really difficult. Sometimes it equates with I don't care about my students type thing. So it kind of sets people up really to explore this territory with the aim of engaging with doing less things so that you can do the things that you've got left behind, maybe 85% capacity. You're putting all your energy into that and then hopefully going a little bit deeper, achieving more, that type of thing. So, any questions from what do you reckon about that? Oh, we've got a comment in the chat. Grant has
You
said,
reckon about that? I like that, Mark. That's
"What? What do
it's a
you
very
mean?
good way to ask for feedback. So what do you reckon about
Well,
that?
what say you?" So Grant says Simon is a great speaker and high energy. Oh, and Ellen says that she has met one of the authors, Simon Breakspear, at a conference in Hong Kong, I guess. High energy. Okay, that's interesting. I'll have to investigate further. Um, Pruning old ideas and traditions can be challenging whilst also being potentially so beneficial. That's right. That the whole book revolves around that central idea. So I liked it's very poetic but very practical as well.
Mm.
And I think, well, these are kind of X number of years ago, you wouldn't have got a book like this because those ideas wouldn't have come in. They sort of weren't in people's minds, maybe. Whereas I think we have to talk about COVID and the trauma of that and business
Mm.
as usual. And
Mm.
I guess it's good that people are critically or maybe reassessing whether, why we're doing something. Oh, sorry.
Um,
I
do you
wonder.
remember when we did this on Twitter and Ruth used to join us? Do you remember Ruth? She taught in an IB school in Queensland, and around the time of COVID, that was something she said her school leaders really, after COVID, spent a lot of time like working out what they could cut out and just really create space. I remember that. Yeah.
I feel like gardening is a very common leadership metaphor, though. I feel like that's a recurring.
Mm.
Is
Anyone
it?
with me on that one?
And parenting comes up in
Mm.
parenting a lot too.
Oh, well, it's a growth and caring, nurturing, that kind of
Mm.
thing.
It's interesting when you look at it through the kind of competitive is probably the wrong word, but through the lens of schools that are essentially kind of competing for students and things. In my previous teaching career, I was at an international school, and this was something that I brought up as a concern around young students being just too busy, with all these things going on. And but the school was an international school and it was competing for students, and schools want to say that they have everything on. So I think there's an interesting tension there. And I'd be interested if anyone listening has any thoughts on that as an idea as well.
Yeah, there's a few more comments in the chat. Um, One of the things it does explore is if stuff is working, kind of, and then you've already invested time and money into it, it's kind of like, oh, no, 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 we don't want to get rid of that. And so it's like a
Mm.
decluttering in a way. It reminded me of Marie Kondo kind of territory of, how do you get rid of stuff that is kind of still useful, but you kind of have to in a way just to get a bit of breathing space, just to kind of, you know, get things to happen. Or,
Mm.
even to a degree, I liked the surface level element as well. Because if you've got everything packed and jam packed and you're really busy running around, then you do lots of things that are on a surface level. You don't actually have time to get into the different rhythm. So that
Mm. Go
resonated with
deep.
me a lot.
Yes,
Yeah.
something that I have seen in schools is that sometimes there is this idea of presenting new processes or new ideas, a lot of new stuff. you know. Then this sometimes is this idea that every 2 weeks we're going to try one strategy, and then you present a strategy, you try it for 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks after you try another strategy. But the truth is, teachers, they haven't had the time to actually reflect on what's really going on this strategy, or trialing it for a longer time to try to get themselves better at doing whatever the strategy is. And then there is this idea that, oh, that strategy is awful, it doesn't work. And it's because they're doing it in such a hurry. It's not the strategy the way it's supposed to be done according to research. It's kind of a mutation of it. That happens when you're doing 100 things at the same time. So I think that's very important to be selective, but it's difficult sometimes.
Absolutely.
And that happens with leadership changes too, right? Like, new leader, oh, my philosophy is different. Let's throw out this strategy initiative we've been working on for 3 years or whatever. Malika, if you want to jump in with your comment, please feel free. Thanks, Neri. But we might go to Tracy, because we've got special guest Tracy Izzard here.
Can I, while Tracy's on the way up,
Yeah.
I'll just mention that my background is a Green Square Library in Sydney. I visited there a few months ago, and it's a really nice library, actually.
One of the great joys of our monthly chat, if you're new, is that Mark's background always changes, and mine never does. Hello, Tracy.
Hello, Tracy.
Hello. So
Well,
I'm very chuffed. Thank you so much for asking me along, and it was so nice to meet you face to face, Lottie, a little while ago down at Reimagined.
yeah, what a great conference, eh?
Fantastic.
Very cool. Well, welcome. This is our Educators Book Chat. Now, you are probably most well known for Ferocious Warmth. I'm saying that because that's how I know you, and I feel like everyone I've spoken to talks about this book. But you've actually written 3 books. You've written The Buzz, Glue, Ferocious Warmth. So, who's your favorite child?
Well, The Buzz, which is just like a little playbook. Like it's
I'll share my screen.
Like
Yes,
little,
beautiful.
It's really. But I wrote that in 2015, and it really holds true today, because it's all about that metaphor you're talking about, Mark. It's all about the buzz of a really thriving professional culture. One where we're learning together, we're curious, we're open, we're connected, and so for me, they sort of really link, because we can't have a culture with a buzz unless we've got this brilliant leadership that actually helps to create and nurture a culture of high challenge and high support, being able to have that great psychological safety. We're intrepid together, we're working together as a collective. And so I can't split those two, but I think Ferocious Warmth has got quite a lot of the newer stuff of the buzz in it. So I suppose it has to be Ferocious Warmth.
You don't have to have a favorite. I'm just joking. So, for somebody who doesn't know what Ferocious Warmth is, Ferocious Warmth 101, what is it? What is it? Yeah.
Think about a great leader that you've had in your career or at your school. Like, some of my great Ferocious Warmth leaders were actually educators that I had, teachers that I had. And they're the people that just help us be the very best we can. And they are able to connect to us at a personal level. So there's that great human to human compassion, connection. That's such an important core value. And at the same time, they're really good at supporting us to be our best and stretching. So I call it the balance of the head and heart. And being able to contextually know when to go more heart, more head, like a gin and tonic, making sure you've got the right mix depending on what the context needs. And I just, I've been doing this work that I do for about 19 years now. And I just know that across that time, I've come across so many people that are just brilliant examples of Ferocious Warmth leaders. But I've also come across leaders who get it right out of balance, and they're either far too fearsome and they inflict trauma, they're too authoritarian, they don't ask for anyone's opinion, It's my way or the highway. So they're too much in the cognitive. They're very logical. You can't bring in that emotional intelligence piece. Or they're on the other side, and the relationships are a bit out of balance. They're a bit drama triangle. They're a bit cliquey. There's a whole lot of empathy, but not a lot of movement, And so when I sort of pulled apart the great leaders that I'd seen, there were just this beautiful blend of both the head and the heart, and able to access both. So, and I was actually with a principal in Townsville when the concept actually popped for me, because I have always done leadership around 3 intelligences: strategic, emotional, and learning intelligence, being the learner and leading the learning culture. But I was with a great principal in Townsville at Rasmussen Primary School, Claudine Moncourt, her White. I just saw her in action, and I just said to her, "You've made something pop for me. You're ferocious about your kids, you're ferocious about the community, about your staff, you're ferocious about helping these students thrive. But just as much, you've got this incredible warmth that brings people and compels people to you." So she sort of, I just went, but also through the work that I do, just came into my mind going, that's them. That's the metaphor for them.
Awesome. Now, you've been doing this work for a long time.
Yeah.
Well, quite a long time. Before I know Mark has a question, and maybe Stephen, what are some of the trends? I was sort of wondering, like, what are the trends in leadership? When I started teaching a long time ago, the authoritarian principle was, just the stock standard and the expected, really. But that I feel like there might have been, quite a big shift in that. But what are you seeing changing with the trends around leadership?
Well, I think it's the trends are responding to the needs of the world. What we know worked for years actually had an undercurrent of not working. It created compliance. It created black and white thinking. It created, this is the way we do it, and we don't push against that. Whereas we know that we have to shift so many paradigms in education, in health, in all these things, especially to make inroads into equity in the world. And so what I've seen is this realization that leadership has got to focus on the human element. It's got to focus on connecting people to what we're doing, but also connecting people to each other. Mental health, we know that burnout is such a huge issue. I've worked with so many places where they struggle so much because people feel disconnected. And so there's that part of that human connection part, that trust, that have we got each other's backs? But just so that we can really do the work with the students. And we know that that's getting far more complex all the time. But at the same time, how do we get our brains together? How do we collectively come together around really wicked problems? And instead of getting into polarity, actually come into listening deeply to each other. And that's the big shift, I think. So I see great leaders are the ones that can sit down with anyone that they work with, or and have a deep conversation about things, and listen with curiosity and wonder, and be willing to be wrong. And that's a real shift, from the leader that said, I know all the answers. I know all the answers. And, I don't need any help. Actually, you just do what I say. That's just so old style now, isn't it? And we know it's not what makes us thrive. So they're the big things that I see happening. Some of them.
Mark, have you got a question?
I do. I have 2 questions. One of them, I noticed on the back of one of your books, it says being, not doing.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So it's that concept of that when we are in a leadership space, that sort of a holistic leadership space, yes, there's the stuff we do. The conversations we often don't have, or with ourselves and with each other, is how do we want to be? And I was at a leadership Women in Leadership program that I run today, and it was actually in the health sector. And I work with lots of different schools, lots of leadership teams, lots of teams that actually talk about how do we want to be? How do we want to be when we come together around really sticky situations? How do we want to be when we come together as a professional learning community around a particular problem or practice? How do we want to be? But in some schools and in some organisations, they've never done that work. They've never talked about show what we value? They've never talked about what I call the MVPs, the minimum viable practices we want to see. So it's about that, Mark, that quite often we get down on that dance floor and we're just doing stuff, but we're not really sitting and reflecting on how do we want to be when we're leading.
Very good. Another question. I noticed one of your books, you did an Audible version, and I want to know what the experience was like for you as an author.
Yeah, that's a great question. It was a great time. Do you know what? Thanks, Mark. It was right in the middle of COVID, and I had to get to, so I think most people are in Melbourne, but not everyone. But I had to get one of those permission to leave the 5 kilometre type of thing. I can't remember what it was. From my employer, which was me, which is okay. And I went down for 4 sessions.
I'm
So
calling the police now, Tracy. This
yeah,
is
okay.
just done stuff in.
Signed by myself, Steve. And so I went down to a studio in South Melbourne for 4-hour blocks. So it took 16 hours to do, sitting in a little booth with this great audio man who was just brilliant, because you just end up getting into a rhythm of, because I stuffed up all the time, like all the time. And sometimes it would take me a while to get into the groove of it, or I'd be parched and my voice would crack or whatever. But, I would say something, just make a mistake. All I'd have to do is pause. At the start, he would say, okay, go back. I'd just pause. He would take it back, and then I'd say the sentence again. And we got into a real rhythm. And it was during COVID, so it was really eerie, but there were people working in the studio. And there was someone working on a Chinese war games video that had a huge amount of noise and everything. And one day, the audio guy and I were sitting there, Hui and I were sitting there and doing the thing, and all of a sudden things started rumbling and all that sort of stuff. And it was when that earthquake happened in Melbourne in 2022. And we thought it was the guy next door just playing his music too loud, but it was actually the earth moving for everyone. So that was also something that I remember about it as well. So thanks, Mark. And it was, and if I can, I love that I did that, because I get a lot of feedback from people that they really love hearing the author say.
Oh yeah, no, it's a great approach. I love it.
Yeah, and quite often it'll freak me out actually. I'll be doing something, up in Queensland, something, or New South Wales the other day, and someone walked in and said, "Oh, I was just listening to you on the car here, in the car here," and I went, "You are going to be so sick of my voice by the end of the day." But yeah, anyway, so it was a cool thing to do. Yeah.
Very good. Now, Grant has a question in the chat. He asks, is ferocious warmth a style that works now, but potentially not in the past?
That's a great question. I would say that in some sectors, I think it's always been there in great leaders. Empathy, emotional intelligence has always been there in great leaders, and I think that's why there's been so much research on it, because again, where do we find research from? We see evidence, we see practice-based things that are working. And so the emergence of a lot of research, I think, comes from those pockets of when we start tracking things that matter, like tracking culture, tracking people's satisfaction with work. I have a Buzz diagnostic. It's had over 15,000 educators go through it around their professional culture. And the correlation between we have a high level of trust and connection in our school goes right over to we work as a learning collective as our school. We're open to good, robust debate. People of influence model our professional values. It just really is strong in all of those. So I think talking about feelings, talking about vulnerability was absolutely not done for a long time. So yeah, I think it wasn't around as much. And I know, say, working with a lot of women in health today, with surgeons, things like that, that are surgeons having to work in a very male-dominated environment, ambulance that were there, paramedics today, it is a real challenge for them to actually know that showing care for people is a leadership capability that they need to hang on to, because if they're not careful, the culture will try to push them out of that. And they're pushing against that, because we know from results and surveys and mental health and transition and recruitment that if we don't get the relationship stuff right, we don't get people at their best. So, yeah, I'm glad the research is catching up. Actually, it's one of my books that I'm reading at the moment that I wanted to mention tonight. That's a really good one, I think, around that. I think that was Grant, Grant asking that, is Cultures of Growth. And I've got on my iPad, so I haven't got the physical one, so I'm just going to hold up my iPad.
Good.
Now. Yeah, so this is, so Carol Dweck, you know, she brought growth mindset. It's in every school.
Yes.
And I got to work with her when she was at the Eightsville Holt conference, and I emceed and spoke at the Eightsville conference a few years ago. And growth mindset's always been a big part of the buzz. But I've been always fascinated with the collective growth mindset. So I think we can have a really good individual growth mindset, but our environment actually doesn't help that sing. It might even shut it down. And I'm sure you can all identify groups where you've been able to just step into your power as a leader and a learner and a curious educator, and ones where you feel stifled and shut down. So I've always been fascinated by that collective growth mindset, because I think that's really a big piece, and it's harder than individual because we've got all our human dynamics. And so she is a researcher that was on Carol Dweck's team. And she went to Carol and she said, look, I have a suspicion that the environment that we're in really plays a part on that. And I went, yes, that's right. Absolutely. I've got years of being able to give you a lot of practice-based examples of that, but also the buzz diagnostic now. So anyway, her book is all about that impact. And she talks about two cultures, a culture of genius, which I'm also fascinated about, which is I am the expert. I don't need to learn anything, actually. I know I get excellent ATARs for my students. You can't be telling me how to teach any other way. Or my leadership is exemplary, even though people are yelling at them, no, it's not, in the kindest possible way. So that expert that's learnt, not learning. So cultures of genius, where it's that human capital, it's not actually anything to do with our collaborative capital. And then versus cultures of growth. And so those two cultures being the things that she's investigated. So I'm in the middle of that. There's a lot of stuff that I'm resonating with and see all the time in schools, schools that really work on creating a culture of growth are just amazing places to be. So I think, again, there's the research catching up with what we know, because we experience it all the time, teams and cultures that allow us to really grow and expand and just experiment and try things and look at what works and look at what doesn't, and ones that stifle that. So.
Hey, I noticed your T-shirt. I just got a little snippet. Are you able to just sort of show us a bit more, or no?
Yeah, I put it on because I was cooking the salmon and I didn't want to get on my dress, but it's.
I knew it. I saw it. See, I got my little.
Yeah. There we go. There we go. And I do wear it, and sometimes it embarrasses the people I'm working with. But you know what? I don't care, because I reckon we're all being Wonder Women and Supermen in our own way, wherever we can make a difference. So.
There's a question from Jennifer. What advice would you give if you were working in one of those cultures you just mentioned, i.e., I am the expert, and this is how we do it? I mean, I'm familiar. I have worked in such environments myself, but yeah, that's a question from Jennifer. So, what can you tell us?
Yeah. It depends on how many are in the team. If you've got a whole team of experts, maybe move jobs. You know, especially if they are really ensconced in where they are, because I think, you know, you can be expending so much energy. But I also think we can make a difference by posing curious questions. So I reckon a great curious question to a group of experts is a question that makes them look to the ceiling and go, that's a good question. So we've got to find questions they haven't got answers to. And that could be anything. That could be, that could be okay. Here's an easy one for schools that don't have a lot of student agency. how do we know whether we're hitting the mark on this with our students? You know, and for those who never want to hear anything from students, that's a pickle to answer. Do we know we're hitting the mark? And I think with experts, we have to really get a bit hard hitting with our leveling up questions that actually go, are we interested in finding out? What are we curious about here? This is another one I love to do. If you've got a problem of practice, you put the problem up on a big whiteboard or on a big piece of paper. I like working really visually with people because I think it gets people seeing each other's words. And say you've got an issue you're trying to solve in the middle, and all you do is you stand up at the whiteboard all together, everyone's got a pen, and you write up as many curious questions that you can about that. So it's almost like what we do is we create an environment in our culture where what we're leveling up about against each other, a little bit of competition, is how curious are we? Right. So we're appealing to people's sense of, yeah, I'm curious. I'm a good thinker. I'm a problem solver. But great problem solving is usually about being incredibly curious first. And, you know, and then go, well, what are the ones we've got answers to? Because half the time we ask questions that we already know the answer to. That's often what we do when we're experts. So, you know, so how do you create an environment where curiosity is something you're aspiring to? Robust debate is something you're aspiring to. Because I've found in a culture of experts, we're actually not good at it. Things get hidden, they don't get talked about. We have transactional conversations rather than transformational ones. So, yeah. I don't know. Does that help?
Hi, Tracy.
Is that Jennifer?
Thank you. Oh, you're making me depressed because I've just.
Oh no.
I can't say much. Anyway, thank you. That was awesome.
Yeah. Okay. Look, to me, this is part. I'm really interested in this space. It's probably going to be my next part of writing because I have been working with several organisations where they have got people, a lot of people want to try things. They want to do things differently. They want to break out of where they're at, but they're held down by this group of leaders that are hanging on. And let's face it, they're hanging on because if they let go of a whole lot of power. They let go of a whole lot of status. And so it can be really problematic. And, you know, we know that there's, you know, there's examples and research around things like dogmatism effect, where we expect our experts to have a dogmatic opinion. So we have to change the culture, all of us, I think, as leaders, to show how are we displaying our learnership? How are we saying, I don't know? How are we saying, let's get all the good brains around the table and let's really pull this apart with no one having the right answer, but actually co-creating the best answer. And that's powerful when we can have a team that's willing to do that. But we've got to let go of status and ego. And that's problematic.
Thanks, Tracy. Do you have any more books you want to share with us before we invite Grant up here?
Yeah. If that's all right. This is a left field one. I'm really passionate about leaders who see that, well, and educators seeing that wellbeing is not an add-on. It's actually it's a leadership behaviour. And this time last year, I had just come out of having a triple bypass open heart surgery because 3 of my arteries were almost fully blocked in my heart. So I had to have my you know, my ribs cut open and breastbone and all that sort of thing. And I'm really great now, but I got in touch with a colleague of mine over in the States, Jonathan Fisher, and he and I had connected because he's a cardiologist. It's very much around not only the physical health of your heart, but the mental and emotional and spiritual health of your heart. So anyway, he had his book in beta. And I said, hey, can you just send it to me? Because it could just help my recovery a little bit. And so he sent me his book and now it's out. And I would really encourage you to read it. It's called Just One Heart by Jonathan Fisher. And it is all about the research. So he's worked on about 4,000 hearts. And he was very disconnected, very dislocated from people. His relationships were very aloof. He didn't look after himself very well. And he started realizing that that wasn't any way to lead his life. And so this is all about all the research he's done, all the findings he's found, and the way he lives his life now, to actually make sure that his head and his heart and his whole body and his spirit is in the best shape possible. And for me, around education leaders, this is really important work, because we know that education leaders tend to put everyone else before them, and educators do the same thing. And yet we know that that's actually really affecting health and well-being and our ability to do the job. So there we go. I'll get off my soapbox now. Thank you.
Thank you so
Right.
much.
Enlightening.
Stick around, Tracy.
Yeah, for sure. Thank
Yeah,
you. Thanks for having me.
and
Thank
you know,
you.
join in. Yeah, so good to have you. Grant, come on up.
Am
Yay.
I up? I presume I'm up.
Sure.
Welcome.
You're here.
Thank you.
Grant, you've written a book. It's called Curating Inquiries, and I actually shared this book a couple of sessions ago. So one of the things I loved about this book, there were a lot of things I loved about your book, but the playlist. Tell me about the playlist that you have. You have a little song for every chapter.
Yeah, I think I've always loved music, and that's kind of been something that's gone through my whole life. I was in bands when I was younger. Please don't ask me to sing now, because I say when I was younger, all that time has eroded. But yeah, so music sort of just always spoken to me, and I think that when you listen to a song or you hear a really cool lyric, it just resonates and connects on different levels. So for me, it was a little way of bringing in a little bit of that into a text that has absolutely nothing to do with music. So it was a little self-serving, but I think yeah. So for people, I think it's at the back of the book or the front of the book somewhere, and you can just scan a QR code and you can listen to the junk that I grew up with and really enjoyed. Yeah.
Very
Ooh, there it
fun,
is.
very
There's
fun.
hold that QR code up.
Oh. Okay, let me find it again. So tell us, what's the story of this book? How did it come into being? While
Story of the
people are
book.
scanning QR codes.
Good work, man.
Proceed with caution. No, it won't work. I can put it in the chat after.
Yeah.
I can't multitask, so
That'd
please
be
don't
great.
expect me to do it now. But yeah, I think the story of the book, I've always had a bit of a passion for, I suppose, student-led or student action or student agency. Before those terms are really coined, I kind of just always had that belief of the kid should be the center of everything we do. And I think that was just shaped from some of my experiences as a student with some of the teachers that I viewed as being the really impactful ones on me. So when I moved into the world of being a primary school teacher, that was what I wanted to do. That was a flavor I wanted to bring to the space in which we occupied every day together. So over the experience of working in different schools, you pick up things that work and pick up things that don't work, and you kind of find a little bit of a passion, and you go down that rabbit hole and you go a bit deeper. So yeah, for me, it was not a cumulative kind of expression, but it was a lot of the work that I've done with schools as a teacher, and then working in the capacity I do now was just a way to kind of say, hey, this is possible in your school, and it's not a book that you have to read from front to chapter. Sorry, from front to end. You can just pick up a chapter, and if there's something that you wanted to do, you could potentially apply that. So yeah, it's just an exploration of what could be possible in a school if that was what worked for you and what you were seeking.
And Grant, what about if we're high school tragics like me and a couple of people in the crew? Can we use it too?
Yeah, I think that would be probably best applied on a chapter by chapter approach. I would probably wouldn't recommend. Although if you're in an IB school, there's certainly elements that would resonate in most of the chapters. Certainly not a cover to cover applicable for most secondary settings, but yeah, look, there's a question on how to engage students or how to encourage them to take action. There's a section on questioning. So they're transferable skills that don't necessarily resonate within an age. They're just things that could be explored in schools should there be a passion for that.
And would you say it'd be better suited for like someone in charge of curriculum or just a chalk-faced teacher type?
That's a really cool question, because I think when I wrote the book first, Stephen, I almost wrote it in two halves. It was almost, the first half was instructional to the coordinator or to the leaders, or to that management side of things, and then the second half kind of clicked over and it became now that the school's got itself set up, there's the capacity to say this is how teachers could start to engage in this. So through the editing process, it became really clear that the part one, part two kind of philosophy didn't work. So I suppose for anything that's school-based, there really should be an all-in approach. So for me, there's probably things that are probably more aimed towards admin and leadership, but I would suspect that to get any meaningful change, you've got to have everyone on board. So for everyone to be understanding and have a depth of knowledge or understand what the journey of school is going on, then it's applicable for everyone.
Tracy's popped a question in the chat. Do you find schools encourage curiosity in general?
I wish it was the case. I wish it was the case, Tracy. I think, and I think I'm going to answer that in a couple of different ways, because one of the things, and I think you mentioned something about it previously, was that connection between the head and the heart, and to me that's a really big thing, because you ask questions with your head, but your heart kind of leads you in a different direction. So, I think when I look at do schools encourage curiosity, I'm not sure there's many leadership teams that encourage their teachers to be curious about their craft. I think there's schools that are curious about how do we improve, but I'm not sure there's many that provide that space for the practitioners to be really curious about what they do. And I think to the same degree, if the teachers aren't experiencing that freedom or the agency to explore their own curiosity, I think that has a potential to kind of stultify or nullify that transference for, as a practitioner, as a classroom teacher, do I provide the space for my students to exercise curiosity? So I'd like to think there was more of it, and I think that's a really necessary thing, because you ask questions, you get answers. Sometimes they're not the answers you expect, but the more questions you ask, the more things you uncover, and the more things start making sense to you. So, I would love it to be more so, and maybe I'm just not working with the right schools at the moment. That could just be it as well.
I have a question, if that's all right.
Of course it is.
No, get out of here. Get out of
Sure,
town.
mate. Come on, mate. What are you talking about?
It's related to, if that's all right. It's related to inquiry learning, because I happen to know that inquiry learning does have its critics, and I'm just wondering why, what's informing that, or might be it's a big question, but I guess I love inquiry learning. However, it's kind of in the mix of all the different approaches. So I'm just have you got any insight, Grant, into why, or where are people coming from? Do they misconceive what inquiry learning is, or they're, more comfortable with other approaches, or, got any insights from your experiences?
Yeah, I think one of the really interesting things, Mark, that when I a long time ago was at Teachers College or at uni and learning to be a teacher, I didn't hear the word inquiry at all. And when I was still in schools, employed in them, we would have student teachers or pre-service teachers come out from universities, and the first taste that they would get of inquiry would be in school. So perhaps, and this isn't I'm not sure what needs to be taught at university, because there's a whole debate on what's necessary for pre-service teachers to be equipped with when they enter the workforce, and I'm
Joanne,
not
you might
weighing
not
in on
want to
that one.
jump in
So
on this one. Sorry. We have an expert in the audience on this.
but we do. But yeah, I just think that it comes down to a comfort level, because there is a body of research around lots of different pedagogies and the effectiveness, and there's bodies of research around the effectiveness of inquiry. It's just a matter of, do they balance, and if the system or the school is going this direction, is there airtime for professional learning and professional practice, and the space to make mistakes and learn from them around inquiry? Or is it a matter of, I'm pushed because we've got an excursion, or we've got an assembly this afternoon, or gee, maths went long, something's got to go on the timetable, and it's generally the HAS or the inquiry, or that's the one that goes. So perhaps it's just not valued enough, but that's content rather than process. But I'm a bit of a I used to be much more of a Simpsons fan than I currently am. And every time I think about the question around the pedagogical debate around inquiry or explicit instruction, I come back to this clip of Homer Simpson, and he's sitting there, and he's got the sock'em rock'em robots on either side of his head, and he's playing with them, and they just keep punching him. Both sides keep punching him in the face, and he just goes, "Damn you, sock'em rock'em robots! Can't we all just get along?" So, pedagogically speaking, explicit instruction versus inquiry. The kids are the ones in the middle. The teachers are the ones in the middle. Can't we all just get along? Wouldn't that be a nice reality to operate in? So, I don't know if I've actually answered your question or just talked about The Simpsons.
It's ongoing. It's an ongoing. Yeah.
I did pre-warn you there was going to be dogs barking, so my apologies.
I got another question, but it's kind of maybe if we heard from someone else, but if not, I'll just go ahead and ask it.
Yes, ask the question, and if you are thinking of coming up, then pop your hand up and let us know, and we'd love to get some people up soon.
Now, I happen to know through my own kind of professional experience of curriculum mapping, mainly with TAFE and vocational. It's not for the faint-hearted. It does take a lot of time. You do put all this work in, and then it's like, oh, you got 3 pages of notes, and that's taken you, this amount of time. Do you have any tips for educators on how do you tackle the task of curriculum mapping, just generally, what makes it easier to kind of, get all the bits? Oh, look at that. That looks like a curriculum ready to be mapped.
Are you a Word or an Excel person? How do you do it, Grant?
How do you do
Post-its?
What are you?
I dance between Excel and paper. I would never use Word, just straight up. But I think I like it. If you're going to bake a cake, hang on.
Metaphor.
No, I won't use a gardening. I won't use a gardening reference. I was going to use a gardening one, but I'll use a cooking one.
Thematic now. If you're pretty good garden.
No, I wouldn't even know what to work on that one. But no, if you're going to bake a cake and you buy the cheapest flour and the worst butter and the no-name chocolate, whatever you're going to put in there, you're going to get out what you put in. So, but if you buy better quality ingredients, perhaps it tastes that little bit better. So, for me, it comes down to it's an investment in time. So, I would absolutely advocate for that being a priority in schools, but then that's something that I've always prioritized myself. But when I like to work in themes, not terms. Terms just do my head in. The notion of, well, we're in week 10, so we better stop our learning, just doesn't make any sense to me. So working, like if you've got a framework or a conceptual framework in which you're going to allocate all your curriculum across, and whether it's going to be across an A and a B year, or whether it's going to be across the grade 1s and 2s, or the 1s and the 2s, it's basically just going, well, here's my themes or my conceptual framework, and literally just cutting up standards or cutting up and trying to disaggregate them and then reaggregate them into
But are you doing
spaces
that
where that
literally
learning.
or in your head or on a spreadsheet or all of the above?
Uh, I suppose, yeah, potentially some of it happens in your head first because it has to happen in your head because you can't go, oh, I'll put that one over there without actually having that notion. But
There's a logic there,
no,
yes.
I do work with there is, but no, given how many standards there are in
Yeah, oh, that's right.
Australian curriculum, there's no way you could manage that. Well, I certainly couldn't in my own head. So when I work with schools, uh, I'll create a digital copy on Excel and literally just put all of the standards there and then print it off for them. They cut and paste and place them into under the conceptual framework and work out what's going to work well together. And then they've got that flexibility of moving things around. Then it gets committed to, and then you develop inquiries around that. So sort of removing the notion of learning being in silos. Because if I'm doing a unit on geography, why wouldn't I do maths at the same time and look at mapping? Because they're happening anyway. So just finding those natural connections and working out when things work, they work together, and when things don't necessarily need to work together, I don't often map the literacy in maths. I generally work with all the other curricular areas first, and then encourage schools to say, well, if this is what your inquiries or this is what the rest of your curriculum looks like and is mapped, how is the literacy going to support that, and how is the maths going to support that? So, if you ask for a tip, I would say exclude literacy in maths and go with the rest.
But there's a table. There's lots of tables in your book which talk about mapping, Grant.
Yeah, ironically, I'm not a visual learner.
Was it your book that made the point that not everything has to align beautifully and you can just have a unit of math that doesn't fit? And I think it was your book, right, that talked about that. Yeah. I thought that was, very well noted, because I think a misconception about inquiry learning is that everything has to fit and people are trying to like cram everything into this unit and it just doesn't fit. And then they go, oh, it didn't work, well, yeah, because it was sort of almost set up to fail.
Yeah, and I think it's same with, I have that same mentality with specialist or single subject teachers, that notion of if your curriculum doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. I think you have to honor the curriculum that you have. And if a PE teacher doesn't fit in with an inquiry, then why make them? Just like long division or double digit by double digit multiplication is probably never going to fit in with many inquiries. So why would we?
Now tell us, what have you been reading, Grant, before we go to anyone? What else who wants to pop up here and share?
I've got them here. I've been reading Never Underestimate Your Teachers. It's an older book that I don't know where I discovered. I just came across it and thought, I'll give it a read. But it's a really practical book. It's not a this is what you must do. It's more of a nice reflection. Say, oh yeah, that could happen if we were in that headspace. And there's lots of anecdotes. And I think, Mark, you'll be happy. There's lots of metaphors and analogies littered throughout. So you're welcome. But no, does
it talk about Carol's work though? Because then you're really speaking Mark's language.
I shall go to the back of it, and
I have not listed
in the index. I mean, it doesn't have to make it onto your list, but I'm sure I'll reread it for you and make sure there's a direct reference before you engage. So yeah, I read that, and that was interesting because the byline for it is instructional leadership for excellence in every classroom, and I think it's a really cool thing to be aspiring towards. And then the other book, and I read this every year. Like it's literally my annual read, and I do it around this time of year. Is Richard Gerver's Creating Tomorrow's Schools Today. I've read that every year since it was published, and it was published maybe in about 2010. So I literally just bring that out every year, and every time I read it, I find something really cool from it. The best quote in that is something around if you've got a child who's sick and they're in bed and it's a cold winter's day, I'm paraphrasing. This is not how he writes. He's much more eloquent than this. Um, so if they're sick, lying in bed, it's a cold winter's day, and they've got to go to school, why don't they want to get up and go to school? But if they were still that sick and still that cold and still a winter's day, and you're going to go to Disneyland, why would they jump out of bed and do everything they could to get there? Why can't we make our schools more like Disneyland? What can we do as teachers or as professionals to sell a brand that is education and schooling? So that's just my go-to annual book that I just read because it just sings to me. It's really cool.
I like that as an idea, as a practice, revisiting the same book and then looking or, re-engaging or discovering new things. And it's kind of, it's a very kind of, I haven't heard that before, that notion, and I like it.
Can we throw it to the floor? Does anyone else have an annual book or a semi-annual book or a biannual book or other fractions of time that I don't know about because I'm not very intelligent? But anyone do that? Once a decade I read. Neri, yeah, go.
Well, not an annual book, but I have we all have comfort food. Don't you have your comfort books?
Yes.
When you are going through something in life or when, things are not the way you want them to be, it's like a refuge. It's like okay, I'm going to give this to myself and I'm going to reread Illusions from Richard Bach for, I don't know, 100 times.
I have
think
that on my shelf.
Isn't that beautiful? I love it.
What are your comfort books, Neri?
That one. The one
I
that I
have
just mentioned.
several. Illusion from Richard Bach, that's one. The Way of the Peaceful Warrior from Dan Millman. Magic realism, I can tell you, like Water for Chocolate or 100 Years of Solitude, Isabel Allende. It's like bring me back home.
Oh, lovely. Awesome.
You got to type them out, Neri. They're all good books.
I know, it's like...
I don't want to go read them now, but you got to type them so I can go find them easily.
Awesome. Thanks, Grant, so much. And does anyone else want to come up and share? What have you been reading? I know, Stephen, you'll have like 5 million titles to share as well, I'm sure.
If pressed, but no one wants to be here till 9:30, do they? Or is that just me? I'm told on myself. Oh no, I
want to know what Stephen thought of AI snake oil.
Oh, yes.
Well, other people are kind of in the crowd are, summoning their bravery to step up onto our stage. But, what have you been reading? Well, both of you, really.
It's been a slow month for me, to be honest, and I definitely haven't got to AI snake oil. It's on the bottom of a big pile. I'm in Goodreads at the moment because I'm too lazy to put on LinkedIn.
Whoa.
Too busy. And
this is the slow month,
doesn't it? If anyone's ever opened Goodreads on a browser, I'd recommend doing anything else with your time because it's horrible. But anyway, and because at least I can't see Alicia, so I'm
why does AI undermine democracy, and what can we do about it, Stephen?
Oh, I wish I could tell you.
Oh, where do you start?
Someone posted about it, and I went, "Oh, that looks good." And then I read it and went, "It wasn't." But Alicia, talk to us. You got your hand up?
Yeah.
But your face hidden. Come on. You can't look any worse than me. It looks like I'm in a police interview room here with the delight in my face. Tell us the truth, Stephen.
Come on up, Alicia, if you want to. And I think there's a couple of people in the audience who might want to tell us about a recent exciting professional learning trip overseas, but maybe
China. Alicia, talk to us.
I actually don't know why I had my hand up, but I was hoping you were getting into some of the Sally Rooney stuff, but no, don't go there today. I can't work out.
I've told you and Stephen, you need your own Zoom room for a Sally Rooney debrief.
Oh, I can talk about Sally Rooney in a very respectful way, I promise.
Go then. Go. I want to hear this.
You've been reading other things. Tell us about what else you've been reading.
No, they're all boring. So I read all the Sally Rooneys.
Wow. Had you never
I
read it
would
before?
No, never had heard of it until Alicia said Intermezzo, and I went, all right. So I think there's one that I haven't read because I did Conversations with Friends, Normal People, and Intermezzo, but there's another one, but I don't know. Didn't get to it.
There is another one, but that's okay. You've probably read the best ones.
Yeah, well, it's sort of interestingly, Jem had read them all, and so we went into detail. Well, she hasn't read Intermezzo yet. But I think I did it in the wrong way because the first one was real good. Normal People was real good. Conversations with Friends it was a bit too much the same, I felt.
Mm.
At one point, the main female protagonist just gets a little bit self-harmy in a way that didn't make much sense to me. But
Do you
maybe,
agree? Do you agree that Intermezzo is her best writing when it
so
comes
much,
to writing?
so much, yeah.
Yeah. When you look at kind of the actual writing of it and, how she's, constructing the back and forward and the inside of the heads and stuff like that, it is
Mm.
it is her best writing as a writer.
And it's impressive because the other two are very much female character centric. It's like this is
Yeah.
female perspective, and then to jump into like now half of the characters, maybe more. I can't really count, or follow more than one plot line at once. But it was like, ooh, this is good. Male characters and complex male characters, and it was good. But then it almost kind of flipped because then it was like the female characters were sort of window dressing a little bit in Intermezzo. Maybe not. Thoughts?
I don't disagree with any of that, but yeah, I guess I also really appreciate that how much she develops as a writer, and that actually we can go on this journey with her and see her, from book to book, and now probably in some of her best work and some of her best writing as well. And I do love following an author's journey and seeing kind of what they come up with, what their next book is, and like you said, to move from just not sad girl novel kind of literature, but then to move into a male perspective and a head and a voice and stuff like that to get the voice and the writing so well done. But yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed a bit of Sally Rooney too.
Oh, wonderful. And it's like her gift seems to be like the conversation just before, or the conversation you have when you're flirting with someone. Like she's the only author I've read who's like able to capture that kind of like fast talking energy of like, you're talking
Your
really
relationship, yeah.
in the next 10 seconds. So it's like blah, 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 blah. And my brain was saying this and my mouth was saying this and yada, yada, yada. It's like a rare gift, I think.
She does emotional intimacy incredibly well.
That's a good way. Yeah. It's like, yeah, it's kind of like you get the sense of like walking out of a movie when, the world is different after you've walked out of a good film. Like I felt while I was reading her books that I'd be having conversations with people and being like, "Ooh, how should I play this next?" Like you'd say something and it'd be like he or she will remember that, like it had more weight than otherwise.
She was quite young, wasn't she, when she wrote her first novel, Alicia?
Very, yeah.
Like early 20s, wasn't
yeah.
it?
And has done incredibly well. Incredibly well. Yeah. So yes.
Do you want to tell us about other books, Alicia?
No, I'm not. No.
Okay.
No. I've got to put it on my holiday list, and probably I've closed off production for this year, so I'm actually to some extent just reading a little bit less, which is nice.
Yay, holidays.
And I have been buying up big for holiday reading as well, and I'm trying to get through something to send out as well. So yeah, no, nothing nothing special. But I will say I did enjoy the discussion around the pruning principle. I just did reflick over that recently and thought, oh, this is the time of the year to implement it.
It's also fascinating that your holiday involves not reading books rather than the other way around. Else. You're just
Oh
gonna
yeah,
go on the beach and read a book. You're like, I'm just gonna go on the beach and look at my toenails. I don't care.
run after kids, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how to unraise my hand because I'm on my iPhone in bed, which is quite
That's
embarrassing.
fine.
So I was never actually going to put up my hand and chat anyhow,
Well,
or go on the
Well, you're
video.
here now
So
and you're
thanks, Steve,
stuck.
and it's
You're
been
stuck
great.
with us,
Yeah.
It's been
Alicia.
great. Oh, thank you for unraising my hand,
You
Mark. I
have
appreciate
lowered
that.
your hand,
I
Alicia.
know
Thank
Alan.
you.
I know Alan wants to come up and share. Stephen, can you just do me
Please.
Stephen, can you just do me a favor and call me on your imaginary telephone? Yes. Okay,
Ellen,
thanks.
what can you tell us?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I always wonder if people can hear me. Okay, now my son's beside me saying I'm shouting, so I got to talk quieter. Okay, so I am really horrible at reading nonfiction. Every time I come to this, I always feel humiliated at how little nonfiction I read because I read lots of fiction. But right now, my nonfiction and fiction are converging around the themes of identity and belonging, just sort of happened. So I was reading Becoming a Totally Inclusive School by Angeline Au and C.D. Hollins and Stephen Whitehead. And that one is a really thin, really practical book that has loads of, tables and suggestions and continua in there for how would you actually implement this in schools. So belonging or inclusivity, I guess, in the broadest sense, like inclusive of everyone. So this isn't just about learning needs, it's about all kinds of identity. And so that one I really recommend, yeah. And I've been in a book club with Angeline, the author, and she's just really awesome. She is also Australian, actually, but she's located in Germany now. And then along that same kind of nonfiction vein, I was reading The Identity Conscious Educator by Liza Taliesin. And I had the very great luck of going to I'm in a group, another book, sort of a group. And the author was,
you allowed to be
yeah,
like
well, it's kind of it's an affinity group. It's actually a whiteness accountability group. But the author came and she is awesome. And so it was like when Tracy was talking about, people listening to her voice, I was so psyched to read the rest of the book because then I could imagine her reading it in her voice because she's super fun. And it's also really easy book, sort of like a very basic intro to, if we're talking about gender, what do we mean? If we're talking about race, what do we mean? And it has lots of, reflection questions and ideas for implementation. So it's a really nice, easy one. And then not fiction wise, what sort of happened alongside of this is I read The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. And it is like just a beautiful book. One of my friends described it as a gentle book. It's so warm. It's like just so beautiful. I can't even tell you what it's about really. It's got some magic and it's got some, kids who are being discriminated against because they're magical. And yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful book. And my son, who was 12 at the time, also read it. So it's appropriate for that age level. And he also loved it. So I think it's something that you could actually, use with students. It's a big sort of like on the nose with, inclusion and belonging, but it's also it's a warm and fuzzy book. Tracy just said she loved it too. It's just like, it really feels like a warm blanket. It's lovely. I read the sequel to that. It's less lovely and it's more aggressive. It was more of a response to, he literally said in his postscript, I want to be the anti-J.K. Rowling. And it was like, he wrote it in that way. So it was less warm and fuzzy, but I recommend the first one. And then I also read a book called, it's kind of trending right now, so you've probably seen it, Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. And it's really thin. It's, I think, I'm not an English teacher really, but I think it's just a really big satire and commentary on, who can write about what, who could get canceled for writing about what kind of topics and that sort of thing. Because, and this isn't a spoiler because it happens right away and it's in the blurb, a white woman ends up stealing the manuscript of her Asian friend and putting it out as her own. And then when I read the blurb, I thought, how can there be a whole book of this? But there is, and it's ridiculous and awesome. And yeah, it sounds like Grant's read it. He's doing it. He's doing a nodding. So yeah,
Have you read
really
it, Stephen?
No,
I feel like you would have.
Just heard of it a lot. Yeah.
And when people talk about that book, Ellen, that's the way they describe it, right? Like the white woman steals her Asian friend's story, but she doesn't actually just literally steal it and publish it. She actually rewrites like a huge majority of it. So it is around the complexity of who owns ideas.
Yeah.
You know, how do you build on ideas when, you know, and then this whole area of who gets to write about what, and do you have to be from a certain background to write about that, and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of really interesting ideas in it.
I'd say totally. And Grant just put in Babel by R.F. Kuang. I've been wanting to get my hands on that book so badly, and I was searching all over Canada when I was there this summer, and I couldn't get it because Yellowface was out, and it was like pushed her other books off the shelf because she has so many other great like back catalogs. So I've been trying to get all of them, but less easily. And now that I'm back in Taiwan, I think finding it's going to be pretty low chance, but I'll get it somehow, somewhere. Yeah, but those are my main ones. Like, so 2 nonfiction, 2 fiction. And then every time I have like half-read stacks of things all over my room, like from Adam Grant and all kinds of things. And I start them and then I abandon them and go off onto fiction. I'm reading The Fraud right now by Zadie Smith. Yeah, and I love some of her other books. But I'm not loving this
I started
one.
it and put it down too. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like I'm halfway through. Like if it was going to be good, I should know by now. But yeah.
That's to abandon it to me. Life's too short.
Yeah. Oh, and I put in the chat. So I think it was Stephen recommended last year, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. And there's a very first thing I read when I got to holiday, and it was jackpot. Definitely good recommendation.
Beautiful to hear. Yeah, it's like the kind of book that like it's like, oh, this is great, and then bad things start to happen. It's like, now I'm ambivalent about it. You know, so, because to me that was like Sally Rooney, one of Sally Rooney's book. It was like these two people are perfect for each other, and then the whole book was like, and here's how they drove apart and came back together, drove apart, and I'm like, this is not nice, but it's good.
But it's very honest about relationships, like not like human relationships. Yeah, and it's like set in a gaming world, which is really random, right? Which you think a lot of people might not relate to, but it's done so well.
In a believable and non-awkward way. Like, can you imagine trying to write about a video game without making it sound embarrassingly,
like you're a boomer?
Yeah, exactly.
That would be my bad take on it. Awesome. Thanks. Chuck them in the chat too, Ellen, as well.
Oh yeah. Well, I went off onto a tangent of reading and rereading some John Green books as well. And I still really love those. So like The Fault in Our Stars and Looking for Alaska and Abundance of Catherines. And I know, quite a few years ago when John Green was trending, my students were really into it. So I threw it to my son, who's now 13, but he wasn't into it. So I wonder if he's not old enough yet, or if those are kind of dated. I'm not really sure if anyone else reads John Green.
I don't know.
Oh, wow. He's amazing.
I don't think I know.
I mean, I know who he is, but I've never read his books. I'm like, he just makes YouTube videos. And that's all.
He has a ton.
He's like the rare YouTuber who's like, I wrote a book and it's not just a shameless money grab.
Yeah. No, he has tons of books, and Fault in Our Stars was made into a movie as well, like a big movie. So yeah, I'm sure he's written a one recently because he's on a pretty big internet crusade against tuberculosis, I think it is. Like he's really campaigning around eliminating tuberculosis. And so I think part of his book, his recent book, is about that. I bought it, but of course it's not fiction, so I haven't read it yet.
But
Everything is
I think
tuberculosis.
I think that you're right about the timing. My daughters were big on John Green. They were reading everything he published. And now, well, they are 22 and 25 now. And they were doing it like 5-6 years ago, more or less. And now I haven't heard about him more.
There you go.
Awesome.
Actually, can I throw a book in? Because this was a very rare experience. So Jemina, my wife, she does a podcast, and she asks the people that she interviews to share a book, and then she'll read the book. Okay, so normally I'm like, I'll read the book first because I consume books at a voracious pace normally, as you all know. And this was a leadership book, and I went to bed at one point, and she was up late into the night reading a leadership book because she said, and I quote, "I have to find out what happens next." And I was like, "Oh, that's not how those books work. I think you've misunderstood the concept." Can I ask, can anyone guess what the book is? It's like a New York Times best-selling classic, leadership, a leadership specific book, but with a narrative where you want to find out what happens at the end. No one? Okay, well, I'm going to put you on game, as the kids say. So, 5 dysfunctions of a team.
Oh, Matt
Matt's
Pittman
got
had
it.
it.
Ding, ding, ding. There you go. So it's like all about how
Very
to make a good team. But instead of just being like, here's a crappy graphic and here's, some theory that I just pulled out of my butt, it's just like, hey, there's this team and there's this guy named this and this girl named this and they're in charge of this and then their services and blah, 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 blah.
like embedding it into a narrative then.
Yeah. And then the very last chapter is like, oh, and here's the theory. But like, yeah, I speed audiobook listened to it, but like, the house was spotlessly clean because I was like, what does happen? Who's going to get fired? Who's going to quit? Surely Brad's not going to stay or whatever. I can't even remember the characters, but I was like, I was hooked. And then I understood why Jen was staying up late to read a leadership book and then, I was just like, wow.
Matt, if you want to come and tell us about that book or any book,
to do
then
that.
jump on up.
Somehow turn this book into a narrative?
It's smart. It's clever.
It's unheard of, but yeah.
Yeah.
Beck, you got to read it. It's good. You'll like, yeah, it was a page-turning leadership book, which I didn't know was an option, but maybe it's not really my area, but it was good.
Oh, there you go. Tracy uses it a lot in teams.
Oh, Rebecca, you're out of date. We did that like 2 months ago. Did we? Deschooling Society? I feel like that was, you read that, Mark, or did I read it too?
Read what?
Deschooling Society.
That's up in the chat,
That
Mark.
Rebecca beat. There's 2 Rebeccas, so
And there's Rebecca and there's Beck. Beck.
Oh yes.
Oh.
Thank you. Reese Deschooling Society.
I'm sure we did that, didn't we? Anyway, Beck, come talk to us about it if you want. Beck is at the same conference as me, but in a different hotel. So
amazing. There you go. Hey, can I do a quick shout out to this book that I've been reading? I showed this in a previous chat, but I hadn't read it, and I actually got around to reading it. I'm a bit like Alan, you were saying you just have piles of books everywhere and they're all half read. This is me. This is my life. And they all have post-it notes in them. But this is Kyle Wagner, and Kyle comes from an inquiry-based. Grant, do you know this book? Do you know this book? Yeah. So he comes from an inquiry-based background. He's High Tech High, that Most Likely to Succeed. The documentary was made about High Tech High. That was really big, probably about 8 years ago, maybe longer now. What I really like about this book, whereas the teacher, it's all about student-centeredness, but in different sort of dimensions or parameters. So he has this little graph. You can't really see it. Sorry, it's really too small. And then he has his continuum. So for learning design on one side, you have teacher design, on the other, you have co-designed or curated by students, and each of the chapters talk about that, and they give examples from schools all over the world. And he doesn't pack any punches. Like, he talks about, like, some of the stuff is really not that easy, and if you're a beginning teacher, don't jump into this. Like, do something else first. So yeah, I like his practicality approach with it all. I like the fact that the cases are from all over the world. And the other really good thing he does is he has these rubrics too, which is like, this is what it looks like on one side and this is what it looks like on the other side. So you actually really see where things are landing. And if you're wanting to move, towards whatever, then you actually sort of see what that looks like as well. So yeah, and reflective questions, big shout out to this one. What's the title? It's called Where is the Teacher? And it's by Kyle Wagner, and I'll put the link in the chat. And it's all about student-centeredness, and we all know, like, student-centeredness, student agency, student voice, agency, leadership are all, what a lot of schools are trying to work actively towards. So it's a good one.
So we're on the home stretch. So if anyone in the crowd would like to come up, and we certainly have time to hear from you.
Yes.
Well, I feel like we need to hear from Rebecca Burtonshaw because, she's reading Pedagogy of the Oppressed and Deschooling Society, which are both books that I said I deserved a medal for reading. And I was expecting someone to pop out of the culture and just say, congratulations, you're now a higher form of being. But in fact, I just read two fairly boring books. So, Rebecca, if you'd like to come back in a month or so when you finish them, we will present you with your formal I read a book that everyone else has read, and now I get to feel superior. You might be welcome to.
It's like one of those things where, like, I've read parts of it, but now I'm like going back in with like a very specific lens in mind. So I'm literally going between them backwards and forwards to suss out whether or not I can see this thing that I think I might see. Or I might not, but I'll still get the trophy of joining the, short list of smart people. Nah, I'm kidding. I'm being super precocious when I say that.
No, and I met someone who's a Freire expert, and he was saying that when he defended his PhD, the supervisors were like, "What is he talking about?" And then someone had to be like, "Freire," and then the other person was like, "Got it." They just sat there for like half an hour listening to him waffle on about his PhD and his Brazilian accent, being like, "Not really."
And they said Australia.
Somebody else
right.
Somebody also like suggested to go like back to Foucault and stuff like that today as well. And I was like, yeah, like it's just like dial it back just a little bit. Like I can't take on all the big boys all at the same time.
Well, we'd love to hear about it when you do, Rebecca. Not if you do, when you do.
No, it's really good. The part of because I'm also reading the Pedagogy of the Oppressed, not in this like cover to cover. I'm mapping my own journey of it. But yeah, the part that I'm up to at the moment is just this idea of how we are unintentionally creating segregation. Well, sorry. The powers that be are creating that kind of idea of segregation in order to entertain us whilst still keeping the same structures in place. So kind of keeping us busy with this idea that we're all if we're segregated, we're somehow working towards something. But if we weren't, we'd actually see greater issues. Sorry, that's a real summary. But anyways, that's the bit that I'm up to at the moment.
I just love that you just one-upped me intellectually by being like, "Oh no, I'm not reading it cover to cover like a mere idiot would. I'm mapping my own journey."
I'm not just reading it like for fun. I should say at the moment I'm reading trashy books for fun. I've given myself permission to get back into the Christmas spirit. So I'm right down like the trashy book on the side as well. So I'm not
What's the trashy book? We're allowed to talk about that too.
Like so long story short, I read about 3 trashy books a week to keep me sane in the old fun of PhD land. So when I say like that's me time, it's the only way. Like there's very few things that can get you like switched off in your brain, but reading something where you're like, no one acts like that in real life, that actually turns my brain off. Anyways.
Yeah, I think you got to mix it up.
Yeah. But definitely would recommend Deschooling. It's a fun one. It's ironic. It's not very long, but it's I find it quite an easy read, but that may be because my brain wants to like what it's reading. So obviously there's a bias there, but it's really funny that it's written back in 1971, right? And it's talking about like the way society is. And you could basically say that it was written yesterday, but just with different examples.
Talk about radio for internet and stuff like that, and you're like, yeah, pretty much, yeah.
It's the value of measurement is the one that I'm like, that's PhD land. But yeah, there's this idea of there's particular values that we perpetuate through schooling, and so the measurement value one is the one that like speaks to me. Again.
No, it's great.
Thanks,
You're talking
Rebecca.
about books, you're on topic.
Yeah.
Any
books.
have a few minutes left.
We do. Matt, come up as well. Sorry, Jennifer. Sorry, Rebecca.
Rebecca, go. Yeah, no, yeah. We've just got bad hotel internet, so we're going to awkwardly cut people off, but go.
And I was going to say, like, I used some of that actually today at the RE conference, and I actually just like left the you know how usually when you're presenting you might pick like a little sentence here and there, but I actually put up quite a bit of a chunk from this. I can't help myself. A bit of a chunk from this particular book because for some of you that don't know me, this is probably a really good introduction to the crap that I care about. But it was, I'm not sure if I could. Yeah, like this is the kind of the easiest sense of stuff, but
Put it in present tomatoes. Yeah.
all right. Is it gonna question? No, that doesn't help.
There you go.
Tick.
Right, Mark, do you want to do a live reading of it for us, or
do it? Like make it like sound really like presentery.
No, I could, but school presents.
Do it.
No, it would take too long to read out. But once people have the ideas schooled into them that values can be produced and measured, they tend to accept all kinds of. Why is it rankings?
Rankins with an Irish accent, Mark. Come on, you know this. Rankins.
I
don't know.
Yeah, I like this sort of territory.
Like weird...
Kind of critiquing something that's kind of assumed is not a thing, you know? It's like it's getting underneath the culture, or it sounds complex and social and really worth investigating in a way, to my eyes.
Yeah. Well, my presentation today was kind of offering the grounds of a new domain of critical theory. So ironic that you say that, because that's kind of what it was about.
Jolly good.
Matt, finish us up with the last couple of minutes. Thanks, Rebecca.
All right, I can go really quickly. I read the book that you were talking about earlier. And I think, apart from what was already said, the thing that I really liked was just the idea of subtraction rather than deletion and creating room. I think when we look at, or when we feel like we're overloaded with things, we look at just deletion and removing things, whereas subtraction, the concept to me of creating space and even subtracting things that have been working for a long time. I think we hold on to things for too long, and especially things that are working. And so that I really enjoyed that. I read this was one I was going to talk about last week, or not last week, last month, but The Natural Advantage. I like books that talk about green spaces and blue spaces and getting out into nature, because we don't do as much as we used to. But this one was, there was lots of the science, but there was lots of how green spaces draw people together. And so that adds to the social connection. And so the formation of walking groups and things, they're all drawn, and it's like a magnet around these green spaces, and people with pets, and just that social benefit, rather than just the purely what does a green space do to you cognitively and to your emotions and your mood. I found that really interesting. And I'm just about to reread this again.
Yeah.
But we won't worry about that too much.
Not like the author's listening.
I don't think anyone would care about that sort of a topic. It's not thematically on theme. So did you say you're rereading it?
Yes, I am.
Do you reread?
It goes with a book. It goes with a book that I talked about a little while ago, Head and Heart. And I like them both. I like reading them both kind of near each other. Yeah. And I'll probably listen to the audiobook, to be honest.
But
this is all just aligning really like awkwardly, but these were plans. These are not things that are happening right now. Yeah.
Very good. Thanks, Matt.
I'm going to remove your spotlight, Matt.
That brings us to the top of the hour.
Lottie, can I just shout out that I give Matt's book to heaps of my clients that I work with, because it's just such a beautiful book around connection. I know you've probably all done it here on the book club, but Connection Curriculum is such a brilliant book. So shout back to Matt. I reckon it's ace. I love giving it to school leaders who are really want to do the connection stuff better, because I think it's got so much in there for them to be able to use.
Thanks. Thank you. Now, Lottie, I remember earlier you mentioned something about a graphic novel.
Yes.
Could you tell us about that?
We're finishing up. So I'm finishing up in my current role, and I'm going to be stepping out into the big brave world of consulting next year. And one of the things I'm doing is I'm revisiting a project that I did 10 years ago, which is around cultural diversity for kids through graphic novels. So I'm co-authoring a graphic novel with a very good old friend that's worked in global programs all over the world for the last 15 years and still does. We're going to be putting a little message up next week, and it's a bit exciting. It's called Culture Agents, the Unity Code. And it has all the stuff graphic novels have, bad guys, heroes, all of that. So it's not a grown-up book. It's not for teachers to read to improve their practice, but I'm pretty excited. So thanks for letting me share.
That's good. Yeah.
Bit different, something different. So we are at the end of the chat. What's the plan, Stan? Thanks for.
I reckon we should never do this again. That's what I think. Give it at least.
People keep coming, so
give it at least 1 year before we do it again, I reckon.
End of February. It will be anyway in the new year.
We'll figure it out.
Yes. If you're not in the LinkedIn chat, find us, message us, we'll add you in. That's where we share all this top secret information like the Zoom link.
Yeah. I like the longer format. This evening's longer format. Oh, Paul has emerged. We don't have any time for Paul. I'm afraid we've run out of time.
Okay.
It's been going 90 minutes.
Them and then move on, Mark. Okay.
No, well, I guess it's kind of because Paul had mentioned earlier in the week that he was aiming on attending, and he is here, but we've run out of time.
Yeah.
We'll catch
I
you
need to
next
go and
time.
I need to go and prepare myself for my child's meet the teacher and interview tomorrow. So
okay, it is a school night. But I think thanks everyone for attending. It's a very nice number of people that we had.
Yes, and happy festive break for everybody celebrating something in the next couple of months. And yes, a big thank you to Tracy and to Grant. Those links to their books, plural, are in the Wakelet, which is a collection. Once I rewatch the recording, I add in all the books that were mentioned and discussed as well. So you can find everything that's been discussed in this chat and in previous chats as well. And if I've missed something, tell me and I'll add it all in. Cool.
Thank you guys for organizing it.
Thank you.
It feels very good to be back in the group.
Beautiful. All right. See you later.
See you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
See you all in 2025.
Bye.
Yes.